support from Girls in Film Global Network, with a mission to make both the local and international industries more accessible to this new generation of filmmakers by sharing resources, insights, and opportunities. So we host talks, events, activations that's all trying to connect the community. You can follow us on Instagram at girlsinfilm_RSA or find us at girlsinfilm.net. And now I would love to hand it over to our host, Taryn, who is a film journalist and programmer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jabu. So I am the festival programmer and coordinator at Encounters South African International Documentary Festival. I'm also a programmer for France-based streaming platform Cinewax and a content producer and writer for UK and world cinema distribution company New Wave Films. In addition, I'm an advisory panelist for the National Film and Video Foundation of South Africa and a juror for a documentary juror for the South African Film and Television Awards. I also previously worked in distribution for the Pan-African production and distribution company Big World Cinema and for Africa's VR specialist Electric South. So it's a pleasure to be here today to host this panel. And I'd like to thank Girls in Film, especially Chantel and Jabu and Hallie for their curation of this event and for creating opportunities and dialogues across borders for women in the industry. Before we get started on distribution, I've been asked to speak a little bit about Encounters, as well as our collaboration with Girls in Film SA, as we'll be showcasing selected works from Girls in Film and Encounters as a part of the call that went out for the upcoming festival. So Encounters is the leading documentary festival in Africa, which has been running for 24 years as a 10-day event with hubs in Cape Town and Johannesburg. And this year, the festival takes place from the 23rd of June to the 3rd of July at the Labia Theatre, Bertha Dockhouse, and Isivivana in Cape Town, and at the Bioscope, Cine Centre, and the Goethe Institute in Joburg, as well as at outreach venues. And the festival's key sponsors are the National Film and Video Foundation of South Africa, Bertha Foundation, City of Cape Town, and Film Cape Town. And we maintain partnerships with a host of local and international organizations. And we're very happy about our new partnership with the brilliant and influential Girls in Film SA. So Encounters offers expert curation of African and international documentaries, bringing the very best in nonfiction narratives, including short, medium, and feature length to film lovers. And we also pride ourselves on discovering new voices in African cinema, and short documentaries, especially by emerging filmmakers, feature prominently. So within the continent and in South Africa, it's an important avenue for short film documentary exhibition and distribution. And in terms of the industry, we offer Encounters Talks, which opens debates and discussions about critical issues. We also are focused on previously disadvantaged communities and making sure that film reaches people. And we focus on achieving gender parity and place a special emphasis on women and LGBTQI+ filmmakers in our program. So the team up with Girls in Film South Africa is very special because the focus is on short documentaries by women, non-binary, and trans individuals, which will expand the festival lineup of newcomers and voices which are often marginalized. And the films are a curated selection of micro-budget and experimental documentaries from independent filmmakers from Africa and the African diaspora who demonstrate strong perspectives. The films form part of the official selection, and all the filmmakers will be given a platform to speak about their films, either live, in person, or online. And the response to the call was amazing, which is testament to the incredible space that Girls in Film SA provides to emerging filmmakers. I think collaborations like this are essential to supporting women and marginalized groups in the film industry. And we can't wait to see the lineup, or for you to see the lineup on the 25th of May. I'm now excited to officially open the panel and welcome everyone joining us for Girls in Film Talks Distribution. Today's panel is the second in a 4-part series on distribution hosted by Girls in Film SA, and this session is dedicated to short documentaries. We're joined by an excellent panel of curators, distributors, producers, commissioners, and directors who will be sharing advice and insights regarding short documentary distribution strategies. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please post them in the Q&A chat and we will answer as many as we can by the end of our conversation. Jessie, Licia, Nyasha, Paulina, and Sana, in that order, please could you introduce yourselves and explain how you are positioned in the industry and mention any current projects that you are working on.
Thank you for that introduction, Taryn. So excited to be here with everyone. This is a real privilege and an honor. So yeah, I'm Jessie. I'm a documentary filmmaker based in Cape Town. And I also am signed as a commercials director with Giant Films, also a Cape Town-based production company. And at the moment, I am working on 2 short films that are currently in post-production / in the distribution phase, which sort of makes it a perfect case study for what we're about to discuss today. The first short film is it's a profile doc that's funded by the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture and the NFEF. And the other film is a film that I actually made as part of my thesis film when I was doing my master's at Stanford University last year. It's called Drummies. It's a 15-minute short doc about a team of drum majorettes based in Cape Town. And it follows them basically during a slow Cape Town summer during COVID, when all of their tournaments have been put on hold due to the COVID-19 lockdowns. And so that is the film that I'm currently in talks and conversations with regards to distribution. It's been doing the festival circuit since January of this year. And at the moment, I just signed a contract with publication for distribution and acquisitions for the film.
Thanks, Jessie.
Thanks, Taryn, and hello, everyone. I'm Licia Yafet. I'm a film and events producer based in the UK. I'm also the program manager for One World Media. One World Media is a UK-based non-profit organization, and we support journalists and filmmakers around the world reporting on underreported stories in the Global South specifically. So we have an award ceremony that's been going for 34 years, which you might have heard of. And we also have programs like our fellowship, Global Short Docs Forum, year-round events and workshops, where we showcase and celebrate the best coverage of the Global South, and also champion new talent, early and mid-career filmmakers and journalists, storytellers, and we build connections in the industry between the platforms, the commissioners, and new talent. So I particularly manage our fellowship, which is an annual program for emerging filmmakers and journalists working across any medium. So it can be film, print, multimedia, audio, photography. And we provide a grant of £1,000 plus mentoring, an exec producer, workshops through the year, and basically a community, a peer community. Global Short Docs Forum is specifically for short documentary films, where we select filmmakers with a project in production with existing footage. And it's an intensive boot camp, let's say, a workshop where we develop the project and work on the pitching and the business side of being a filmmaker, which ends up in one-to-one meetings with commissioners from platforms such as BBC, Al Jazeera, Vice, Guardian, CBC from Canada, and the likes. So it is a matchmaking effort to create a platform for filmmakers to have their films reach a wider audience. And I can tell you more later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nyasha Kadandara. I am an independent documentary director and cinematographer. I am originally from Zimbabwe, but based in Nairobi, Kenya. I've done a number of short films in the past. And right now I am working on 2 feature-length projects, one in the fiction space and one in the nonfiction space. Personal stories, both from Zimbabwe, dealing with history, past trauma, and how we, I guess, identify now as Zimbabweans and Africans in modern day.
Thank you.
I think it was me next. Sorry if I'm wrong. Hi, everyone. I'm Paulina Tervo, and I'm the co-founder and chief content officer at Lyfta. Lyfta is an edtech platform, so that's an educational technology platform for schools and teachers. It's based on immersive 360-degree environments and short documentary films. We work in a number of schools, both in the UK and in Finland. We're based in both countries. And what we do is we enable teachers and students to experience many different cultures and perspectives from around the world. So we have an active goal to kind of expand our reach globally and diversify people represented on our platform. And this is where we collaborate with filmmakers who are excellent storytellers. We commission short documentaries. We look for stories that are between 3 and 8 minutes. So we're into kind of micro shorts. And we also provide training in 360 storytelling. Some filmmakers come to us with existing skills and knowledge on that, others don't, but we always provide the training. So when we work with filmmakers, we get quite involved also editorially in the telling of the stories, whilst also giving kind of the creative integrity to the filmmaker. So yeah, my background is also in filmmaking. I was a filmmaker myself, and I was always working in shorts. That was my own passion. And since 2010, I've been involved with sort of immersive storytelling. So that's my own background. But nowadays I'm on the other side of things, commissioning films. Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Hi everyone, I'm Sana Yahul. I'm largely based in Glasgow in Scotland. I'm the programme director there of Glasgow Short Film Festival, which is the leading short film festival in Scotland, which has been running for 15 years. So we do competition program and broader program where we program documentary fiction and experimental animation next to each other, alongside a small industry focus as well. And then I'm sometimes based in Vienna, which is where I am now, where I work for Square Eyes, which is a sales and festival distribution agency. So we focus on sort of author-driven, non-mainstream works, both shorts and features, also across genres. And it's sort of a fairly boutique, small slate. So we take on about 10 to 15 short titles a year, maybe 5 features a year. And then alongside that, I do some freelance curation and writing when I still can. So.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's do a bit of a distribution overview and introduction to distribution strategy. Jessie, can you please kick us off and tell us, where does one begin thinking about who the audience is for a short documentary?
That's a great question and a very big question that I don't think necessarily has, sorry, that's my email. I don't think necessarily has one specific answer, but I will do my best to talk from my own experience, and hopefully that helps. So that's a little caveat, first of all. I think audience is always a tough one, and I think it often follows from the format that you're working with. So with short docs in particular, as opposed to features, say, there's a much more limited sort of avenue for distribution than there are with feature docs, just first of all, off the bat. And generally speaking, what that looks like, hopefully, if the film, gets interest, is either through film festivals, which is kind of more of a classical route, or through online distribution outlets, spaces like YouTube, Vimeo Staff Picks is a fantastic space where it gets a lot of eyes and traction. And so there are different sort of forking paths, I think, that can, happen from the get-go. But sometimes it's not exactly a conscious thing. So speaking from my own experience, I've had two short films that have done film festival circuits. And certainly with those films, I conceived in pre-production and development the audience that I wanted the films to travel to. And those audiences, a lot of them were based in different film festival networks. And so I created quite a robust film festival plan of where I would submit the film to. And it just so happens that when I released both of those short films, they got picked up as Vimeo staff picks, which was not a conscious sort of acquisition, distribution related strategy. That just happened by chance and by luck. And so that opened up a whole different avenue of distribution, because all of a sudden I was getting a lot more eyes on the film that then had been the case with film festivals, essentially. And then when it comes to my most recent film, Drummies, which I mentioned, I'm in the process of sorting out acquisitions with, that has also sort of been a series of unconscious related decisions that have led to a very fortunate end game, essentially. But I submitted Drummies to one film festival at the beginning of the year because I did not have budget to apply to many. So I was like, cool, I'm going to apply to this one because it's a cool festival and I know the people who go and it's a great audience. And I just was a big fan of the space. And it just so happened that other programmers from other festivals saw the film there and invited me to screen in these other festivals. And then from that, so it was a broadcaster and then also someone from a prominent, I'll just say, international news publication that has a YouTube video streaming channel. Just by chance happened to get in touch with me in the same week, basically giving me offers for acquisitions to license the film. And this is the first experience that I've ever had with regards to acquisitions and licensing of a short doc that I've made. And so it's been a real learning curve for me and it's been fantastic. But also I think, there are definitely avenues where you can also apply to these spaces without being approached. But I'll just say for sure, like from my own personal experience, that it came through a series of back channels, essentially. So I'm not sure if that sort of answers your question, Taryn, or kickstarts it. I feel like maybe you can come in.
No, that was great. And we can also pick up on a lot of aspects that you've brought up later on in the conversation. So just like looking at the basics, Sana, can you tell us about the role of a distributor and what kind of distribution roles you've worked in and what's on offer to short documentary filmmakers?
That is a good question, challenging question. Yeah, I think as Jessie was saying, I think documentaries are the sort of trickier one, obviously, compared to fiction to find an audience for. But I think from our perspective, in terms of festival distribution, the way we look at it is, or what I would say to filmmakers is that in our case, your audience are the programmers of the festivals, because you don't really have control over the audience of the festival unless you've got really specific aims of where you want to screen, obviously. So it's when we sort of speak to filmmakers, when we come on board with something in terms of the strategy, we kind of ask them what their main aim is. And for some filmmakers, it might be that their main aim is to screen as widely as possible and get as many eyes on it as possible. And then I think obviously that would make your festival strategy and everything around it a lot easier, because then, as also something Jessie was saying, then you can quite quickly and easily start looking at online possibilities, which would affect, if you want to go on a festival run, that would severely affect that. So if that's your aim, then I think you've actually got quite a broad scope of where you can take it. From what we do when you start with a 1 year, 2 year festival run, it's obviously a lot trickier, and you're going to have to sort of research the profile of where your film might fit, what programmers might be interested in that, and that's your line to your audience. But it's the first step will then be, what is the festival profile and what are their sensibilities and what are they looking for? And you would spend quite a lot of time trying to figure that out, I guess. But that's if you've maybe got more of an interest in, above getting a lot of eyes on it, maybe your main interest is industry connections or awards or very particular prestigious selections. So those things, they can go hand in hand, but I think a lot of the time they require slightly different approaches.
And thank you so much, Sana. Licia, can you speak a little bit about the significance of short documentaries, just in general, and what are some of the best platforms for filmmakers to get their short documentaries onto?
Sure. So I can speak from my experience with One World Media, not as much as a filmmaker. My filmmaker career was also navigating the festival rounds, but I've learned a lot about other options, especially platforms, mostly digital online, but also media outlets that we know from broadcasting who also have an online presence now. So as part of Global Short Docs Forum, we work with a lot of these platforms every year who are looking for short documentaries. So we always think that filmmakers is just trying to get their films out there, but these platforms are also looking for films and looking for talent. So that's something to keep in mind. So some of the ones that we work with are Al Jazeera, CBC from Canada, BBC with various departments like the Africa Eye or BBC Arabic or Our World. Arte France has a digital leg. The Guardian and Vice, and also more specific ones like Coda Story. So I can talk a bit about these, but I just want to say specifically before we start that there's definitely been a boom in short documentaries online in the last couple of years, and there's definitely a high demand. And also, I think there's been a raising awareness in filmmakers as well who are making shorts. I think shorts were mostly seen as a step to making features, but now there's actually a slightly more sustainable life making short documentaries and getting paid for them. So that's kind of what we're trying to navigate as part of our work at One World Media. How can you actually get paid doing this? Not that the festival's not paid at all, but it's just an alternative route. And also the platforms and the festival strategy can work hand in hand as well. I think media outlets are very aware that the festival and festival circuits and also that route provides a profile and credibility. So I think it's not as much in conflict anymore. So I can say a little bit about the platforms that we work with and what they're looking for. I think initially I would say most filmmakers think that if they have a very strong vision for their film, the platforms are not going to work for them because the platforms have a specific ask and they have an audience. That might be true, but there's also a range in what they're looking for. I think one of the key things that come up a lot is most platforms we work with are looking for character-driven stories. So following a single character or group of characters, and the story is more important than the issue. And they might not be as experimental and poetic at times, but they're very much human interest, human-based stories. They look for actuality. So they're looking for action and actuality, things unfolding on screen. They want filmmakers to show and not tell. And unfolding story arcs is what they're looking for, stories with a purpose and hope and taking the audience on a journey. And they're looking for access. Who do you know? Are they on board? So those are usually the things that come up when you look at what these platforms are looking for. And then, of course, Al Jazeera has different departments. They can be looking for a 25-minute film for witness. They're still character-led and observational, or they can be looking for 10, 12-minute films for close-up. CBC Canada, for example, is looking for films under 44 minutes, so they can be slightly longer, still character-driven, but they're digital first. BBC, like I said, it really ranges from investigative pieces to a lot more human stories. For example, I know they say investigations, hardcore investigations, but we've had one of our filmmakers film commissioned, which was about a weight loss journey of a man. So it was dealing with masculinity and body image and mental health, or it could be about tea picking women in Turkey, which was on Our World. And then there's obviously a range, like Vice is obviously looking for more conflict and politics and drugs and crime and injustices, and it can have like a very scripted opening, and then it's again a lot of showing, not telling. It can be very different than another kind of observational documentary. And then there are platforms like Coda Story who are looking for specifically films on disinformation, war on science, authoritarian technology. So there's a really wide range, and the best way to learn about them is actually doing a lot of research, looking at what they cover, what they don't cover, and commissioners really care that when you approach them, you know what they're looking for, and you tailor your pitch to what they actually are looking for. I don't know if that answers the question.
I mean, it does, and more. That's just the most unbelievable insight into what people are looking for on the other side. Paulina, Lifter is fascinating. Can you please tell us about when this was founded, and who are the audience that Lifter reaches, and what is important and sort of urgent about reaching them?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really big question, actually. It was the challenges in film distribution that have been now described by Jesse and Sana and Lizia that led us to founding the organization. So having worked in short film and actually worked in this new sort of interactive storytelling, we kind of were struggling to find the audience for what we were doing. And because we were back in the day thinking like documentaries are only watched by adults, because we never really had any experiences with screening our films to children. It wasn't even an option. So we hadn't considered it. So, you know, the work we were making was screened by The Guardian, or it was at film festivals, and sometimes universities wanted to show it and so on. But it was one day in 2016, we were invited in by a school, a teacher who was teaching global citizenship education in primary school in the UK. She had heard of this project that we had about an Ethiopian village, and she invited us to come and talk about it. So we went to this school. We had made this interactive documentary, and it was all foreign language content, and these were 7 to 10-year-old children in a British school. So we had very low expectations of what was going to happen. But when we actually let them use the thing on their own, so they had this kind of very old desktop computers in the computer lab, and we just opened up the project for them, and they just went in and they navigated around this village in 360. They were clicking on things, they were watching short documentaries, all of like 3 to 4 minutes, you know, in Amharic, subtitled in English. They were so excited that none of them went on their break when the break time came, and they just kept exploring and wanted to learn more and more and more. And then at the end of the session, we asked them questions. What did you understand from this documentary? What did you learn? And honestly, their answers were so amazing, and the stuff they said to us was unbelievable. We couldn't imagine that a 7-year-old would have those kinds of thoughts. And when we saw their teacher in the classroom, she was crying. She was so moved by what they were saying. And that was the day for us that everything changed, when we understood that actually we have been underestimating children. And it's just the way things are presented to kids. So if you know, we asked the kids at the beginning, like, who watches documentaries? And one person put their hand up and they said, yeah, I've seen like an animal documentary. And after the session, we said, if documentaries were presented to you in this way, how many of you would like to see them? And all of them were like, yeah, I want to see this kind of stuff. It's really exciting. So we kind of realized that day that there is an audience. It's an untapped audience. So since then, we've been working on Lifta. This was in 2016. And we started working with educators. We've built our team. We also now do teacher training. And we've learned just loads about this audience. We know, obviously, the curriculum very well, but we also learned lots more about children and the fact that we shouldn't maybe be underestimating what they're able to take in. And they are the future, and they are, you know, the change makers, and they kind of do need to be presented with real issues about real things that are happening in the world. In fact, children know much more than we even think. I have an 8-year-old son, so I'm always astonished by what he comes when he comes home from school and tells me what they've learned that day. I mean, his school uses Lifta as well, but that started our journey. And now it's really for us, as we've built this kind of way to reach out to filmmakers around the world, because there are good stories everywhere in the world, and we want to allow children to have access to stories from every country in the world. That's really our mission. And we're, you know, on our way there, but we have a lot of countries to cover, a lot of themes to cover. So for us, it's really important that we can work with filmmakers also in a sustainable way, because we understand the challenges of the industry. So we work with filmmakers where we just need educational rights. So you can have your short film, you can distribute it elsewhere, and also work with LIFTA at the same time. And a lot of filmmakers, they work with us in a co-production way. So we fund part of the project and they can get funding from elsewhere as well. And we can do kind of co-productions, or we can acquire ready-made films as well. So if there is an existing film that is fit for our platform, we can also acquire a license to that film. So we can work in different ways as well. So we are a new platform. There is a new audience, and I think it's really exciting. And I hope that filmmakers will find that exciting as well.
Thank you. I think everyone's thinking the same thing. We're all excited. Nyasha, let's think a little bit about practical examples. Jessie, you started telling us a little bit about the journey of one of your biggest recent projects. Nyasha, can you introduce us to one of your recent or most project short films and tell us about its story, how it's traveled, and where it lives now?
Okay, I guess I can talk about two projects. So in 2017, I applied to a residency workshop called New Dimensions. I was run through Electric South, and that's where I pitched a project now called Lelak, which was a VR piece that looked at the life of Lake Chad and its shrinking, but also the impact of the Boko Haram insurgency. And it's told through the perspective of the lake. And that was a project I pitched at a workshop, and then through developing at the workshop, then managed to get some funding to be able to do some sort of the production. But even then, in working with that, I had to approach another Kenyan company called Black Rhino VR to come on board as a production partner so we could bring the project to life, because we didn't have much money. And then when the project came, we were complete. We applied to Sheffield Doc Fest. And that was 2019. So that's where it started its festival route. And it won the Digital Narrative Award at that festival. And that like really sort of elevated the profile of the project. There are a lot of people who were interested in the piece, particularly because it was the perspective of a lake. It was VR, and it was something that people hadn't seen. So it's had a really interesting life, because even with the pandemic and VR films particularly being even more inaccessible in terms of the whole film festival market, we still found people who wanted to show the film, and it's still going. It's sort of at the end of its festival route, but it's also found homes in different places like museums and exhibitions. We've also had people interested from schools coming to say, oh, we want, to show people this project when it comes to climate change, talking to policymakers. And it's really been, it was some of the distribution channels I thought of beforehand. And I was like, I'd really like it if somebody who like worked at UN environment, like saw this piece. But it's had a much bigger life and gone to a lot of different places and different continents, which I'm really happy about. And I think when you find a film that you can have go to as many different festivals, be shown in exhibitions, and sort of different, like each time people are paying you screening fees, that's like been a real big relief in terms of getting some money back in the project. Because when we made the project, we didn't make any money off it. Like all the money just went into the production of the project. So it was like nice when the project came to fruition, like at the end of the year, having like a royalty check, which is something that, people think you don't necessarily have the opportunity to get. But if you put your film in front of enough eyes in different places, all of that money adds up. And working with like people who are really good with distribution and have the networks to reach out to different places helps you get your film like in front of more eyes, and also makes filmmaking more sustainable. Other ways of trying to get your films is, from the inception of having a project and then getting it commissioned really helps in terms of then securing your distribution line. So I've done a lot of work for BBC. Some of the pieces that I did were complete, and then they were like sold to them as acquisitions. But the more recent projects, there were stories that I pitched to commissioning editors who then came on board and then put in the money to actually make the film work. And, with certain distributors, traditional news distributors like BBC or Al Jazeera, one of the benefits of working with them is that if you're like me and want a lot of people to see the film versus the film being shown in very specific places, they're great outlets because they translate the stories into different pieces, so they have language services, they have they have the budget to cut down to even shorter versions of your film and have like a 3-minute version or a 5-minute version of something that's supposed to be longer. So also thinking about people who you can work with who, for instance, maybe you have a 40-minute film and that might be too long for them, but maybe you could have like a cut down that would be like for a half-hour episode. You see the same thing with feature films that go the distribution, go the festival route, then usually get sold to places like RSA for 1-hour versions, which are 50-minute cuts. So being open to those type of things.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Jessie, thinking about what Nyasha said in relation to your own work and different distribution platforms, it would be great to hear about the trajectory of some of your work. So, for example, some of the earlier exhibition or exposure distribution that a particular film had versus the distribution that you're working with now, and what have you learned in this process?
Yeah, so I think I've learned a lot. I'm always learning. We're always learning as we're going along. I think it's really interesting when it comes to this question or this topic of commissions versus acquisitions, because they're different things. Sometimes there can be overlap. But when it comes to a commissioned piece, it follows that, of course, when you're thinking about the piece, you have to be thinking about distribution and audience, because that's built into the commissioned process with the commissioner that you're working with, and so it obviously depends on the commissioner that you're working with. Often there's incredible creative flexibility and in terms of just the liberties that you're able to take as a filmmaker, and sometimes it's more restrictive, of course. But when it comes to an acquisition, which is really what I mostly have experienced, I think it's always important to think about audience and distribution, but I think it's worthwhile stating that I'm constantly surprised by what distributors and broadcasters often take on that I wouldn't necessarily expect them to have if I'd looked at the film separately, a few months before. And so even though I think that there is a certain rubric or built-in pattern of the kind of content that some distributors want, I think often it really just depends on the film, and a film can come by and totally blow that distributor away. And even if it doesn't exactly fit neatly into that creative or story rubric, they may still want to take it on. And that's certainly what I've experienced with Drummies, with my latest film. I did not expect it to get picked up by a broadcaster or a news publication at all. It was a complete surprise to me. In fact, I'd been in chats with these broadcasters before for my other two films that ended up on Vimeo, and I was expecting them to take those on more than this film. And specifically, I ended up having a conversation with them last night, and I asked them, what drew you to the film? And it was their reasons that drew them that I thought they wouldn't have been interested in to begin with. So they said that they loved it because it was a really fun, uplifting, joyful piece. And with this particular broadcaster and news publication, I would never have expected them to have gone totally for that film. And so, yeah, it's just like a constant. I think it's important to think about distribution and to think about where it's going to fit in relation to the spaces that you want the film to live in. But I also think it's important for you to make the film that you want to make, because often, you just don't know. You have no idea whether a distributor is going to, and not to speak about this for too long, but you could end up in a situation, which I know from friends, where it's not a commissioned piece and you make it custom made for a specific broadcaster or network, and then they end up not taking the piece. And then you kind of are feeling frustrated because you didn't creatively follow what you wanted to do in the process of making it. So I think it's a negotiation between the two, really. I think it's a negotiation between thinking about distribution and then sticking to your own creative guns. And then, but then also, of course, that's all dependent on whether it's a commissioned piece or if it's an acquisition.
Okay, so Paulina and Sana, how do filmmakers actually get in contact with commissioning editors and distributors? Where do they begin?
Did you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. I mean, for us, it's we are commissioning 30 short documentaries every year, including also the 360 footage that we shoot around the story. But so we have around 30 that we do every year, and we publish our thematic and geographical focus areas on our website. They are right now up there, so if anybody's interested in having a look, you can go to the website and see what we're looking for right now. But our mission is to find stories from different parts of the world. So we have more content right now from Europe. We are looking more into Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America right now. The other thing that we look for are different themes in education. So we look at the parts of the curriculum that we haven't yet covered. And we also look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So all of our content covers those kinds of themes. So we look at kind of representing lots of different themes and topics, as well as skills and values that you can learn through the content that we make. If you wanted to get in touch with us, I think that was the question. We have a form on our website where we accept submissions at any time of year. And the form asks you for the proposal that you have, if you've shot any footage already, what stage of the production is, just a couple of questions just for us to understand at what stage you are. And then we look at those every week, and then we basically respond whether we want to take it further or if it's not in our focus area right now. But we are interested in lots of different stories. The only limitation we have is that it has to be very short. So if you had a 20-minute film, for instance, we wouldn't be able to take that. It would have to be cut down to sort of less than 10 minutes. We have been working like that a lot, so that's not a problem. Usually the filmmaker would cut it, or sometimes we've been able to cut a short from a longer film as well. So yeah, I think that's that's a good way to start.
Thank you, Sana.
Yeah, so there's really different ways that films come to us. I think it's maybe worth saying that when we jump onto a project, it's usually when we see it at sort of at least picture lock stage, and we decided it's something we want to come on board with, and then go for the kind of world premiere selection. Or the kind of other option is that we would come on board when we see that a film has a world premiere at a festival, like at an A-list festival that we follow, and then we sort of approach them at that point. But that being said, there's a lot of projects that might be on our radar a lot earlier on because we have heard them in pitches at festivals, or because we've met filmmakers at festivals and they've told us about it there. There's obviously filmmakers that are just on our radar because we know their previous work. We accept speculative submissions on our website as well. Obviously, I would always recommend that filmmakers kind of research what we do and our profile a little bit and where we screen. And I would say that probably most films we take on come through, things that we've already been keeping track of, or things that we're discovering ourselves. But then we, one of our most successful films of the last year, which actually won the Palme d'Or in Cannes, it was a short fiction, but still, that came to us as a speculative submission as well. So I think all these routes are possible, and what I would recommend, and apart from speculative submissions, is for people to really, try to attend industry events and festivals and try and speak to distributors and sales representatives there, because even if it's not that project, when you know that someone's working in a similar sensibility to you, I will have them on my radar with what they're doing next. So.
Nyasha, can you give us a little bit more practical information about your BBC commission, please?
So I've had 3 well, okay, so for the 2 commissions, the first project came through at the beginning of when Africa Eye was being launched as part of the 2020 project. So that was in 2017 that they were beginning the project, and they had done a focus group and they're looking at different issues that people were interested in around the continent. And one of the things that came up was the sugar daddy culture. So they sort of gave me a week to do some speculative reporting, find out what characters I could find. And from that, that's when I met 2 of the characters who ended up being in the piece, Jane and Grace. And I filmed a scene with each one of them and showed it to the commissioning editor at the time and said, this is what I found, this is what I'm thinking we could do. And that's what led to being a multimedia piece. It ended up having 3 video pieces and then a long text read and some artwork in the piece. And so that was the beginning of that project. And then for my second film, which was now sort of broadcast feature-length documentary that was imported for my body, the story basically came about with one of the characters from my previous piece, who then had been trafficked for sex work in India. And so I went back to the same commissioning editor that I had worked with in the past, and I said, there's been sort of an update in the story, and I think we should do an investigation. And at that time, we had a lot of evidence, prima facie evidence, which you need when you're doing investigative films, and particularly when you're going to go and do undercover filming. So I had all of that, put that into a pitch document, and then sort of had to present all the evidence of why I thought this was an important investigation, and also a due diligence plan as to whether we could get our primary subject out of the country after the investigation was done. And that was what then led to them actually commissioning the project, within the timeline of being given an exec and the support to be able to carry out an investigation of the matter, because it wasn't something I could have done by myself. It was a big team that had to work on a project like that. And in cases like when you have big projects, I think it's important to find the right team and network of people who can support you to tell the story in the best way possible.
Thank you. And Lucia, how do you help filmmakers find a bridge to these sorts of organizations? How do you help filmmakers develop these relationships?
So we work with them in the short term and the long term. So basically as part of our fellowship, we work with them for a year, and they come to us at the stage of an idea in pre-production or research stages. So we work with them to develop their projects, and in the meantime, start thinking about where this could go. Obviously, there's no recipe, as Jessie was saying, there are lots of surprises along the way. You might plan for a commission, it doesn't work, you finish the film, then get a surprise acquisition. So for the fellowship, we work on the storytelling aspect, the things I was telling you about, like in terms of finding the character, the story, is it actuality based, is there a story arc, all of those things about actually bringing the film to life, and then help them identify where they would want this to go. So again, as Nyasha was saying, it depends what you have in mind. It might not be exactly what you have in mind, but if you are going for impact and a larger number of people seeing it, obviously these platforms are a great way to go, but then it's not guaranteed. But basically we do the brainstorming on audience distribution, all of those things together, and then guide them in the right direction. We organize sessions with commissioners sometimes, like a meet the commissioner kind of thing, where they come in and tell us what they're looking for. And Global Short Docs Forum is this basically in 4 or 5 weeks. So we have films with footage in production, because we find that for emerging filmmakers, whether it's their first film or they don't have that much that they can show for, it's a lot easier to convince a commissioner when they have actual footage, a trailer, a teaser, a rough cut. It's not guaranteed. If you have amazing access, you can just get a commission as your first film. There's, again, no rules on this, but we just found that it's slightly easier if you can say, this is my vision, this is a proposal, and this is what I've shot so far. My character is amazing. This is what you're gonna see on screen. So we select films in production with footage or in post-production, and we work with them for a few weeks to find the right language to present it, to write the log line, the synopsis, what to include in the treatment, very practically working out a budget. What would you like to get for this film? What would you agree to? As long as you have an idea, you don't have to know exactly what you're going to ask for, but we start these conversations so they're prepared when they're in front of a commissioner, because confidence is the key thing. It's more than budgets and templates. It's about having the confidence to present your project. And we find that it's much easier for Global North filmmakers than Global South. And these opportunities just to practice and practice with your peers, with mentors, it's an incredible opportunity to just be ready with the elevator pitch and the written materials and all of that. So that's what we do to prepare them for the pitches. But we also talk to the platforms. We talk to them regularly. We have happy hours. We have sessions where we tell them this is not just a sales pitch. This is also a mentoring opportunity. So talking about like finding new talent, expanding their roster. So it might not be this film they're interested in, but they build a relationship and they can go to them again afterwards. Or it's much easier for filmmakers to go to them after that. So we basically create a space to start that communication. And also to tell the commissioners, filmmakers need to be paid, filmmakers need to be given a chance. We talk about fair pay, we talk about saying no, saying negotiating fees, negotiating rights. We talk about co-productions. We mediate between different platforms to say, would you do that together? That would give the filmmaker a bigger budget. So we kind of act as a matchmaker between the two sides.
Just a quick burning question. What do you look for in a fellow? How does one get selected?
Oh, wow. We're just in the process of selecting our next cohort, so I'm in the middle of it. So for our fellowship, we're looking for the person and the project. So we're looking for people around the world who have a project that can be delivered in a year. So a short film or a print piece or multimedia, but in terms of film, it would need to be something either we haven't heard of before or something that brings us a new perspective on an issue that we know of. Mostly we say underreported, so we don't hear it too much in mainstream media. But we're also looking for, we're obviously looking for creative stories, but we're also looking for the actual person. They should be in their early or mid-career, with some work and some experience in the industry, so we know they can deliver. But also this opportunity would open doors for them. The community element, the mentoring, the workshops would kind of help them take the next step in their careers. So yeah, we try to have a cohort around the world that can support each other, that can grow together. And for Global Short Docs Forum, it's slightly more specific because we work with platforms that are joining the pitch meetings. So we look for projects that could possibly fit these platforms, keeping in mind there are lots of surprises. You never know what they're going to say yes to. They say they're looking for something and then they commission something outrageously different. So we keep an open mind, but just look for people and stories that are promising.
Let's turn to festivals. We only have a little bit more time to speak amongst ourselves, and then we will open questions to the attendees. Festivals are, of course, a critical launchpad for exhibition and distribution due to either the prestige of a festival and their capitalization on world premiere status of a film, or the visibility they create for potential acquisitions for buyers and sellers, or because they may be the only platform available to showcase films in a particular region where short documentaries are neither broadcast nor play in cinemas. And while the reality is that festivals are often the primary option for distribution of short documentaries, it's extremely difficult to get into top tier festivals, and submission costs are also extremely high. So Sane, thinking from the perspective of a programmer, can you tell us a little bit about programming short documentaries at the Glasgow Short Film Festival. What do we need to know in terms of premiere status, strategizing for a festival run, length, diversity, things like this?
Yeah. I think my programmer point of view and my distributor point of view are quite have a bit of a disagreement on this all the time. So at Glasgow, we don't require any premiere status, and obviously this I think we're a smaller festival, obviously, so we're able to do that. I personally wish that that's not a model that we had to work in, but here we are. So I think for us, we show quite, I mean, one of the main things we look at is quite sort of formally innovative work. So we show both in documentary and other genres. We don't show many sort of what you would want to call traditional or conventional narrative. So we look at sort of formal innovation, new ways of telling stories, different voices of telling stories. In terms of premiere status, so this is sort of going between my a programmer distributor point of view, but obviously if you're strategizing and you want to get to one of the A-list festivals, then it's kind of it's sort of knowing for yourself a little bit, researching for yourself a little bit in terms of how realistic that will be, because it is obviously a much smaller chance. And every one of these A-list festivals also has a very often they have a quite different profile and type of film they show. So it's sort of, on the one hand, looking at where your film might suit, but then also making sure that, like, while obviously your dream would be to premiere at an A-list festival, you also don't want to have your film lying around for too long and therefore passing up a lot of other opportunities in the process. So it is sort of a bit of a like back and forth, and it's a balance that you kind of need to decide for yourself. I think if your aim is really to get into these big festivals where you do need premiere, like world premiere, international premiere statuses, try to keep in mind that if that's not necessarily something that seems very realistic, that there's a lot of these kind of like, I don't know what you call them, A- or B festivals that are as good, and very often, if for a documentary, for example, are like, you know, I think people immediately think of, in general, they'll think of like Berlinale, Sundance, Cannes, whatever. But, you know, in documentary, you've got really important things like Vision du Réel and CPH Docs and these really top documentary festivals in the world, ITFA in Amsterdam, which might also be, you know, they might be equally or even better to launch your project if it's still, I'm going to say this is still a very competitive field, right? It's still not a given. But that's something to keep in mind, I think, when you're strategizing not to take too long. And even then, what I would say, coming from a short film festival point of view, a lot of short film festivals will program, you know, documentary fiction and across genre. And I find that especially if you're sort of early career, that they can be on a personal level sometimes a bit more beneficial, because in these big festivals, these A-list festivals, you are kind of drowning, you know, they're largely feature focused. The short film world is like a little niche bubble there where people are usually nicer, but no one looks at them. And it's, I think if you're then going onto that short film circuit, or even just like a niche festival circuit, whether it's documentary specific festivals or even like human rights documentary festivals, you know, like that kind of stuff, you're going to get your film in front of programmers who really pay attention to them. So therefore that then leads to further opportunity. And I think purely in terms of having access to panels and workshops and connections that you might be using later on, it's a huge different, like it's a different advantage that you get in those places. So yeah, and in those places, like a lot of the time they wouldn't require premiere status, or they might prefer national premiere statuses, but this is something that you can work on as you're going. So yeah, I mean, on this, I would also say this is something that, and this is a tiny little tip that I tend to tell filmmakers, that if you're finishing a film and you're starting out on your festival strategy, a lot of people will start submitting and they'll be, okay, I finished my film, it was in post-production, we completed it in this month and this year. And then they'll list it as that production date until they get a selection, and then keep listing it as that production date. And a way to like really maximize your run is to make your premiere date, like make your production completion date when you premiere, wherever that is. Like that is your completion date, because before that, no one has seen your film, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not saying like do this with a film from 10 years ago, right? But like, but I think there's when you think of a festival, a film's festival run is usually between 18 to 24 months. And if you just, you can really add a good chunk of time onto that for new opportunities if you just list your date accordingly, because I think this is something people don't realize. Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling a bit, so I don't know if I've really fully addressed that question, but.
You have, and again, and more. So thank you so much.
Good.
And you've also made a really important link for us, because we want to ask Jessie and Nyasha if you can just give some examples, maybe one or two, of festivals that you have found to be important for emerging filmmakers in terms of the associated benefits and opportunities. It would be great to hear about whether there were particular networking or pitching opportunities or premiere status. Jessie, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. So shout out to Encounters because Encounters has definitely been, honestly, Encounters was one of the first festivals that really like invested in me as a young emerging filmmaker and took a chance in screening one of my first films. And throughout the years, Encounters, through different panels, different labs that they've done that I've applied for, Encounters has been an incredibly supportive festival and market space. And then also the Durban International Film Festival and the Durban Film Arts. Like, honestly, I've had the privilege of going to both international and local markets. And quite frankly, for me, the most beneficial ones have been the ones in South Africa. So Encounters in the Durban Film Festival, for sure. Not just in terms of making industry connections, but also making connections with your fellow peers and other filmmakers from all over Africa, which is an incredible opportunity that is often not, afforded. That being said, I will just diverge a little bit to my current film. And with regards to distribution, it's interesting. Someone in the chat asked the question regarding A-list festivals, and so I actually, from my experience, have experienced that the festivals and the spaces that wouldn't necessarily be categorized as A-list have actually been the most important with regards to distribution. So, for example, my film showed at this film festival in North America called Aspen Shorts Fest, and it turned out from conversations with other filmmakers that was actually the space with the most distributors and broadcasters present who were screening for the sole purpose of distribution. That I think, like, in terms of the people that I've spoken to, that was almost, it had the most acquisitions out of all festivals that had happened in the months prior to that. And so I think it's really important to never take for granted any space that you're able to screen in, because really you just never know who's going to be there and you never know what eyes are going to be on the film. No.
Thank you for the shout outs and to all the wonderful South African platforms.
I think it's an interesting question, because I think festivals have personalities. They're almost like holiday destinations. Like, what kind of vibe do you actually want, And I haven't been to as many festivals as I'd like, partly because of the pandemic and other things, but I can talk about like the experiences. I remember going to South by Southwest in 2016, and that was where one of my shorts that was a student project ended up going to be showcased at South by Southwest as part of a sports storytelling competition. And it was a huge festival. But I remember, and this is why I say like they have personalities, because I remember getting this email about South by Southwest and they were like, don't dress up. this is not that kind of vibe. It's very relaxed. Like everything is around the city, talk to everyone. And it's a mixed festival. There's fiction, there's nonfiction, there's music at this festival, which is unusual compared to other film festivals. And they had this whole ethos about this is how you do South by Southwest. And it was very much about like, we're all on the same level, we're all going to interact, like go see all these different things. And there was so much to consume as a result as well. And I think when you think about your films, you also think about like the film you've made and, you know, where its best home is, because these festivals are different. You get some festivals that will show more art house films. And if you've made a film like that, that's probably where it should go. I would second, you know, Jesse's point to going to festivals that definitely have some sort of film, like a meat market, industry market attached to it, I think is a really good idea. So whether it's like Sheffield that has the meat market, Durban International Film Festival that has DFM, or Hot Docs that has the Pitch Forum, things where like different types of deal makers are going to go into them. Because even though your film might not be accepted to one of those formal pitch meetings, my experience, like for instance at Sheffield, is there were just so many rooms that you could walk into and actually meet those commissioning editors on the day, you know. And I found in the end, I spent more time meeting people than actually watching the films in person, because there's so many people, especially if you can do it physical. Like there's so many people who are like, oh, let's grab a coffee, or oh, I really like the conversation we're having, but I'm on my way to this other venue, so let's walk to that venue. Or you meet someone at a different, you know, these festivals always have parties, and you meet people, like you're networking from like morning to 2 a.m. And going to the festivals that pull in a lot of people, even if you just like spend, because they know as independent filmmakers, you don't have that much money. You just buy yourself one ticket, or if you're a student, get like that one day and just go and like chat to as many different people, and also chat to different filmmakers, because, you know, they know what the hustle is like, and tomorrow they could also be a decision maker.
Okay, we have two fantastic questions from attendees, and we also have 10 minutes left. So to anyone who would like to take this, the question is, as a student, the RAND value and access to funding often hinders an effective distribution scheme. What can young filmmakers who do not have access to a lot of funding, but who do have a short distribution ready documentary, do to distribute their films in a successful and well-rounded way? Okay.
I don't know. It's obviously a tricky question. But I would say in terms of what your budget would be for submissions, if we're talking about festival distribution routes, first of all, try for that to be something that is part of your initial production budget, like factor that in as early as you can. And also, if you have connections with any programmers, festivals anywhere, like don't hesitate to ask for waivers or discount codes to do that, because I think if you're not working with someone with a distributor support for this kind of stuff, your submission fees are going to rack up really, really quickly. And a lot of that can be mitigated, I think, by you know, just researching properly and seeing what is most realistic for your film, and where you think it's worth taking the risk to spend money on. But for example, you'll see that in the US, festivals ask for a lot more money than mainland Europe, for example. So I think even though it's always going to be fairly costly, there are things like reaching out to people, making connections with people, and really researching like what kind of festivals do I want to end up in? What does my film suit? And of those, which are worth paying what fees for? You know, like there's plenty of festivals in the US that ask for $60, $70 to submit a short documentary that are nowhere near as valuable as the one in Europe or elsewhere that asks you for 10 euros, you know? And the thing so it's annoying, because it obviously, it's again, a lot of your time and resources that you're having to give away for free, but it's a way to sort of navigate that a little bit.
Okay, our second question is, how does distribution with streaming platforms work, and how do you approach that avenue?
I can try to answer that. I can't speak to the streaming platforms like Netflix and some others, but I can only speak about the ones that I know of that we work with who have a digital leg, or they put their work out on YouTube and other platforms. How to approach them. So there are a few ways which have been mentioned here. One is if you know the direct person to approach, do that. I would recommend a lot of investigative work. Go to the Global Short Docs website, find the commissioners who attend and stalk them, or find them on social media. Or, I mean, I'm not talking about personally emailing every single person, but if you are dedicated to reach a certain platform, you can find the editor or the commissioner through the industry events, through the panel discussions, and find the person who will be watching your film. Short of that, there is obviously submission forms on most of these platforms where they tell you exactly what they want, and you fill in a form and you submit it. So those are the official ways to approach them. I would also highly recommend just applying for free fellowships, free programs where you have a support network, and a bit like our fellowship. I know there are lots of others where the application process is free, but then you tap into a community and then you can have these conversations. Even if you're not a part of our fellowship, I would, for example, say, go to our website, find our fellows, find our alumni, see where their films have ended up. Get in touch with them and ask, which festivals did you apply to? Which platforms did you approach? We try to encourage a lot of communication amongst our alumni, and we've had a lot of peer-to-peer support. So I would suggest, if you're in the early stages of your career, just not be shy to just openly ask, what did you do? Can you tell me? How did it work? How much budget did you have? Were they nice? So yeah.
Jessie?
Yeah, just to quickly add to that point, I think it's a really great point. And also just, look, rejection, coming from a filmmaker's perspective on the other side, rejection is not fun. It's not nice. I have a whole mailbox full of rejections, just a folder dedicated to rejections, which I cherish on the side. That being said, you never know, just cold emailing someone, I think even if you don't receive a reply, you never know if the person's actually taken stock of that or not. And sometimes people can just be busy with different things. So for example, with the online distributors and broadcasters that I've been in touch with, I'd actually emailed one person in the team 2 years ago, and they just happened to mention that and remembered my email and my film, which they'd never replied to. And I thought that they'd never watched or seen. And that connection that I'd made, that cold email that I just, took a chance on, actually paid off like 2 years later. And so I think, as difficult as it can be putting yourself out there, I think it's always worth the chance, and you never know when it's going to come back to you in some way later on down the line.
Paulina and Sana, please weigh in.
Thank you. If you have a completed short film that have the educational rights available, then you can always submit it to LIFTA, actually. Because even if you are doing the festival circuit, it's not anything that will conflict with that. So you can still go ahead with the festivals. You can also, contact other distributors as long as the educational rights are there. So that's one way of making additional income, actually, for a short documentary that's completed. Also, if you have a longer film or feature that's completed or in production, you can also come to LIFTA at that stage, because we very often work with projects that are in production of a feature, and we then work together with the filmmakers to produce a shorter version for LIFTA. And yeah, so I encourage you to also think of it that way.
I just very briefly wanted to jump on what Jessie was saying about rejections from a festival distribution perspective, because I think, I think we can say this, but just for reassurance, sometimes I give filmmakers the numbers that we deal with, because because I actually think it's quite important. Like when I think of, we have a fairly successful short film catalogue. Our most successful short film in our catalogue, I think, screened at over 200 festivals, maybe 250 festivals. That was still only 50% of what it was actually sent to. And a lot of that is people requesting it as well, after hearing or seeing it. Our films, which the standard in our slate, the short film slate, which again, it's like, I think it's a fairly well regarded slate. The standard acceptance rate is probably 10 to 20% of everything we submit to. And that's us doing well. So I think that's quite an important thing to know, because you're going to feel really discouraged, and there's going to be a lot of this. And it's important to know that you don't entirely get discouraged, and that there's some reassurance there, because I do think for every film that has at least, a certain quality standard to it, there's a space for it. There's such a wide range of festivals and other types of platforms that I do think there is a space for most types of work. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Please go ahead. Anyone else? Paulina and Yasha?
Okay, what I wanted to add to the question about, you've got a project or you're about to finish, especially your first projects, I found, and that was the experience with me, you're doing everything yourself. You're probably directing, filming, editing. And something to consider is when you feel like you're close to it, trying to get other people on board of your team. So trying to find, for instance, local producers who have track records of working with other international organizations, or who've had films that have gone the festival route, to come on board with your projects, who can help, give you a little bit of credibility, but also who know the networks, who have, ties to different festivals, who can elevate your project. And so, especially because, you do all the work on your own, but you don't always have to do everything by yourself. And it's a good idea, I think, especially when you're still learning. And I've had to do that, is work with producers or even distributors, specifically distributors who know all of where you can actually show your film, how, for instance, screening rights work, and actually helping you get some money back into your projects. So building a team and not just working on your own might be one of the ways. I would contact producers who were from the region I was working in, and just looking at the films that I'm I think my film could do as well as this, and just go on the credits, watch the credits and pick out the names, be where is this person? Look for people's emails and reach out to them and be I have this film, I think it's great. And maybe they could even give you a little bit extra funding just to even boost the film, because sometimes the difference between a good color grade or just an amazing score, just something that can just push you up a little bit and get you into a festival, is something that someone else could come on board and put on your project, which isn't the same as a full-on acquisition, but it's part of the journey to getting your film out there.
Okay, thank you. We have one question, which will, if anyone would like to answer this just briefly, is it wise to ask the distributor how much money a project might make? And if anyone can also just add in conjunction, sorry, we'll actually come back to the next one.
I can just quickly jump in to say yes, essentially. I think as independent filmmakers, it's really important to back yourself and ask questions, even if it doesn't necessarily yield the answer that you want. I think it's really important to ask questions when it comes to possible revenue sharing, especially with streaming platforms. Just with the licensing fees, for example, license fees tend to be an upfront payment, and then whether or not they structure your contract to include revenue, profit revenue afterwards, is a different point. But it's really important, I think, also just to talk to other filmmakers, because sometimes, as terrible as it sounds, sometimes they will see an emerging filmmaker and they'll try and offer a lower fee than others. And so it's very important, I think, to be transparent and to ask people that you know who have maybe had their shorts stream on these platforms, for example. So with me, I ended up basically getting into a bidding war between this broadcaster and this streaming platform, not on purpose, completely like by chance, because I happened to be very transparent with them about what the other was offering as far as license fees were concerned. And so that basically upped the bid in a, you know, I didn't expect that to happen, but I think that just being transparent and open about what is on offer is quite important. And then just to quickly add to the questions, I think just quickly noting documentary streaming platform sites to submit to would be the New Yorker and the New York Times Updocs. They acquire a lot of films. They're always looking at screeners. And then of course, like Nowness, The Guardian, Topic, and then for broadcasters, North American broadcasters, POV, PBS has a strand called POV, and they acquire a lot of short docs also. And they have open submission forms that you can find online.
Okay, final audience question. Can you give any tips on sustaining a source of income through the time it takes in creating and distributing short documentaries? Girls in film should also be girls that eat. I'm so sorry, Nyasha, I missed your hand. Please jump in.
Oh,
an old man?
But I guess I can still answer this question as a independent filmmaker. I'll tell you, at least I have used the skills that I use to make the work that I do, like the stories, for other people as well. So I work as a director for hire, but I also work as a cinematographer for a lot of different clients. And I use that money to pour back into my passion projects while also applying for funding and trying to like pay rent and sustain myself. But I know it can be extremely hard, but trying to think of creative ways to use the storytelling skills you have in different industries can help bring you in revenue to then give you the time that you need to take, whether it's a month off to just write or to go edit or to film.
I'm going to jump in. Yeah, I just want to second Yasha's point, because this is one of the most depressing conversations we have on a daily basis, not just at the forum, but also with our fellows, with award winners, with anyone, that filmmaking, let alone short filmmaking, is rarely a sustainable life choice. And we just say it's not embarrassing or it's not a weakness to have other jobs, to have another part-time job, to have another full-time job, to take on commercial or corporate works, to make connections and to work for other people's films. It allows you to tell the stories that you want to tell while actually making a living. So I think lots of filmmakers we work with hope to have a sustainable filmmaking career at some point just by making the films they want to make. And as depressing as it is very, very hard. No one knows the answer. I've asked many experts. No one knew the answer. So I would just say, don't be ashamed at all to take on other jobs. I know it's very difficult to split your life sometimes, but if they can complement each other, then it allows you to do what you like. In the meantime, we'll be fighting with the commissioners to pay you more.
As we're about to wrap, does anyone have any closing statements, any final tips about how filmmakers should get their films out there? I'm going to put a tip out there. There's a distribution expert called Rachel Gordon, and she's written this fantastic new book called The Documentary Distribution Toolkit, how to get out, get seen, and get an audience. So that's now available to buy online.
Okay. Very briefly, one thing I would say is also that I guess the benefit, if any, from the last 2 years is obviously that a lot of these festivals that are documentary or short film specific have done a lot of these talks and much more broader online and are still online. And I would really recommend I feel that there's a wealth of information and panels out there now that weren't there before. And that gives you a different perspective from ours, obviously, as well. So I would also recommend people go and have a look.
Okay, thank you so much to our incredible panelists. This was an amazing conversation, and thank you so much to Girls in Film South Africa for organizing a very informative discussion. Remember to look out for the next events in the series, and don't forget to follow Girls in Film _RSA on Instagram. And thank you so much to our attendees. We really appreciate your support, and we also look forward to seeing all your films in the future.